We're back now with a story that got us all talking and thinking today. It's a fascinating new study about the mysteries of death, what happens to our brains and bodies, and what it might really be like to die.
Well, it's a question philosophers and physicians have spent centuries trying to answer. What really happens when we die?
Tonight, new science may offer some clues from people who have had near-death experiences.
Dr. Bruce Grayson is a professor of psychiatry and neurobehavioral sciences at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville.
When I first discovered near-death experiences, I found them hard to believe. So I started to collect cases and try to find patterns that were consistent across people, across cultures, across religions.
Researchers now believe 1 in every 20 people will have an NDE or near-death experience. And according to a new study, for people who go into cardiac arrest, it's even more common, with nearly 40% reporting vivid recollections of their brush with death.
So I started collecting as many experiences as I could. And when you start getting hundreds of these, then you can look at what are the recurrent patterns.
I fell headfirst into this concrete bunker, headfirst I was told I went down like a missile headfirst onto the concrete.
I may have just nodded off for a second, not like I fell asleep, but nodded off. But what happened is I swerved to the right, I overcorrected to the left, I lost control of the car, and it was a horrible automobile accident.
And I should have went upstairs and got my screwdriver, but then I was thinking, screw that. I'll use my pocket knife. It popped. And as it popped, it ended up going straight into my arm. And it ended up nicking an artery.
Which is, dying of freezing to death, other than how much it hurts with the frozen parts of your body, the actual dying part's kind of easy, as it turns out.
We got this supplement. We took our normal little bottle cap of this liquid dose, and instantly we both felt something was off about this new stuff that we had gotten from Thailand.
And many people who have these experiences don't talk about them.
Right.
And
right.
What did you find is the reason why? Why didn't you talk about it, and why don't many people who have gone through it talk about it?
I've talked to many patients about why they're reluctant to talk about it. And back in the 70s and 80s, it was mostly because they were afraid they were going to be called crazy, or they were just embarrassed to admit that this strange thing had happened to them. And beyond that, many people say that their near-death experience was just so personal, they can't share it. It was meant for them and not anyone else. And they also say that it was something that is very difficult to put into words. You can't describe it.
It's a universal, fundamental question that every human being asks sooner or later. Where do we go from here? What happens at the end of life?
This is, California coast, the water comes out of the north. This is in March. It's very frigid. It's very cold. A roaring sea, 25, 30-foot seas. It's loud. And suddenly I find myself in this peace, this quiet. I'm comfortable.
I was very relaxed. There was no anxiety at all during the process of dying. I just kind of relaxed.
And then I remember feeling like the world was spinning on me. And as that was happening, I myself collapsed on the ground. And the next thing I know, I'm actually looking down from above, and I'm watching them haul away my friend. They put this body in the back of the ambulance, and this whole time I was watching it happen, and I wasn't recognizing it was my body. I really didn't. I was recognizing that me was up here watching everything.
I hit, and then I was out, and then it's like it was this warm yellow light feeling that pulled me up, and I could see back at my brother, and then I could hear my mom off in the distance screaming, "Don't touch him, don't touch him."
And then I lost consciousness, or things went black. But in that moment, light came. And it's difficult to describe, but it felt as if light came to me, like light came and encircled me. It was comforting me in this hysteria, this horrible trauma of what had happened. It felt as if I was rising above the accident scene. And suddenly I was okay.
and all my senses started getting enhanced. I could smell like everything. I could smell like the coppery smell of blood.
And then I get to this point where it was pointless. It was over. And I became content with my circumstance, and sort of a peace settled on me. And I recognized that I was not going to get out of this. There was nothing I could do about it. And all I can see is a smaller and smaller space. And I remember looking around and wondering what is going on. I'd never seen such a thing. And it just went just like that. And I thought, oh, I must be falling asleep. And then I thought, but I'm still thinking. And when I was falling asleep before, my consciousness shut off. But now my consciousness is not off. And I didn't feel myself collapse. I'm still conscious. I was confused.
And then my vision started going white at the edges and slowly started filling my entire vision. The voices of my wife and the neighbor were slowly fading away. And then all of a sudden, the next thing I know is I'm looking at somebody on the ground from above. And it took me at least a couple seconds to realize, oh wait, that's not somebody else, that's me. And then as soon as I recognized it was me, I shot up straight into the air.
And then all of a sudden the scene changed. I'm like in the middle of nowhere. But it wasn't very bright. It was just in the middle of nowhere, almost like a starry night kind of a thing. It was huge. And it was like nothing around. You know, it's like I was getting further away from them. And that's when I realized that I was being pulled. So when I turned and looked, there was a man pulling me that had my left hand.
And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, that's me. Or that's not me. I'm having this profound connected experience, but there's my body.
Up until this happened, and as I realized that what I was watching was me, it was like all this fear started to flood into me, and all this self-judgment started to flood into me. And I actually had the thought, you idiot, how could you not know you're watching your own death this whole time?
So what happens at the end of life? The soul that was invested in the body separates from the body and goes back to where souls come from.
A lot of people that talk about near-death experiences will talk about, the void as kind of a scary place. But it wasn't for me because I just died this violent death. And so for me, it was calm, it was peaceful, and it felt like I really wasn't alone. I felt like I was surrounded and embraced.
Initially, when I looked up, it was like I was in blackness. And it was like velvet. Like the blackness was alive, like it was all around me, completely enveloping me, and it felt alive.
A very definite place, not some sort of hallucinogenic or vague sort of place. It was a real place.
My first thought was, oh, this is who I am. Now I remember myself.
And I end up in this black void, and there was this white light far away, and it started getting closer and closer and closer.
And so when I saw this light, and it was just a pinprick at first, as I got closer, it looked like it was millions upon millions of fragments of light. 3 of the fragments broke away, and they came toward me, and they were welcoming me. It was more of an understanding, a knowing that was deep within my being, that I'm being welcomed home.
There appeared these presences of light.
People say heaven, they say the spirit world. There's all kinds of words. The only word that comes close to what I experienced is I was home. I was home. I was so welcomed. It was so familiar. I was so familiar. I was home, and I was so joyful.
It just was calling to me. It was saying it's home. Like I knew the place. I don't have a name for it, but I instantly knew, oh, that's home. I know where I'm going. I'm going home.
The further we went, the calmer I got. I still had 1,000 questions running in my head. What's going on? Why I'm here? What's happening? As we got going, it became a situation. I started seeing people.
There was this profound presence behind me, this powerful, cosmic, overwhelming presence.
And then I felt this presence around me and behind me. They were talking to me, and it wasn't in a language I understood or heard. It's nothing I can replicate myself, but I understood what they were saying.
Felt like love. I mean, the same thing that I've heard from a lot of other people who've had near-death experiences. Everything felt like love. I felt like love, and as I moved through space, it felt like I was expanding.
I was suddenly immersed in this bluish white light, which seemed almost like, if you can imagine, a crystal clear stream where the light of the sun is penetrating through it and it has a sparkly appearance to it. It was like that. And the most striking feature of it was, if you can imagine absolute love and absolute peace, that's what this feeling was. And that I had fallen into a river of pure positive energy.
And it covered me so well because it knew me in and out. And it felt as if it was just tailoring itself to my beliefs to make me comfortable where I was at. Like, that's how well it knew me. It knew every aspect of who I was.
And as I approached the light, I was looking down on fields of flowers and just a beautiful scene, like like you couldn't really create even in a movie. It's hard to describe time and space there because it's not like here.
Most near-death experiencers say that in this other realm that they were in during the near-death experience, there was no sense of time. That time is just something that we impose on the physical realm. But in the other realm, there was no sense of time, that things happened at the same time and things happened in eternity. And there's just no concept of how long something took. It was all eternal.
And the first thing that happened was this being started to laugh and said, "No, I'm not God." And I noticed that I was communicating with him instantly.
It was so powerful. I thought, that's God. And the guilt began to bubble up. My little boy's here because I crashed the car. You know, I lost control and cut his life short, and I'm weeping, holding my little boy, and I'm thinking I'm in so much trouble. And I'm feeling this presence come closer and closer. And I became fearful. And I had the thought, I hope there's some way I can be forgiven. And that's when the lid just came off, if you will. There was this download of love and peace. And the first thing that was communicated to me, and it wasn't necessarily with words, it was just flooding into me, is there's nothing to forgive. Everything is in pure divine order.
The vast majority are pleasant, and the typical features of near-death experiences include a sense of leaving the physical body, feeling very good, feeling peaceful, sense of well-being, sometimes encountering a warm, loving being of light, which makes you feel welcomed and loved, maybe going through a review of your whole life.
And I started to re-experience my life. You're seeing your life through your perspective, but it's also like your consciousness is fragmented into these multiple streams of consciousness. And so you're experiencing it from everyone you've interacted with, from their perspective as well.
And as I was feeling this, I actually started to see all the bad things I ever did in my life. Every little thing to every big thing that I'd ever done in my life, including I saw it from the perspective of those who I'd done it to, not just from my own perspective.
I saw my life. I saw my parents' divorce. I saw the insecurities that created in me. I saw that even my aptitude in athletics was just a little boy insecure trying to prove that he was good enough or okay or whatever. I saw my brothers. I saw the accident. I saw so many things, even things that I was like, well, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And this beautiful being that held me said, there are no mistakes. What did you learn? And I was seeing my life in a complete different context. In fact, I saw things and I thought, well, that was wrong. And I know that was wrong. And I knew it was wrong then, and I did it anyway. And the being that held me said, that's your judgment of it, not ours.
It was just amazing to watch your life and how you actually do affect a lot within your life.
And then I went through a hell of my own making, is the way I phrase it. I suffered all of the pain that I gave to everyone in my entire life from their point of view, and all of the pain that I had intentionally given, and all the pain that I had not intended to give, just by accidentally hurting people. And it turned out that the pain that I gave away was 10,000 times worse than I ever thought it was. Every single incident was 10,000 times more painful than I thought it was when I gave it away.
Some would say they had someone there to judge them, or they felt like they were being judged. For me, I was judging myself.
So I got to see some of the harshness of my life. I was experiencing this review, and I realized that this soul family, as I call them, were experiencing it exactly the same way I was. And so I was a little bit, unhappy that they had to experience the harshness of my actions. But I also got to see that when I would do something with loving intention, without any, without looking for any kind of reward or anything like that, but I would just do something with a loving intention, that it created some of the biggest ripples, the biggest after effects. In that life review, you take a hard look at yourself. And so I came out with acceptance of myself, tolerance, which is not something that I had prior to this experience, tolerance for the circumstances and for other people.
It started to show me all the people I'd ever helped, all the people I'd ever made a positive impact on. And not just from my perspective, but their perspective as well. And in a flash, I was able to see the dramatic difference that my life had made on other people's lives in a positive way.
It's like a side effect of being created. This is what happens to you. I don't blame you. I know this about you. I've always known this about you. I love you as you are. And so I judged myself guilty, and I was utterly, completely forgiven.
Judging myself very hard, and there's people there we could have treated better, and why didn't we do this, and why did we do that? I judged myself so hard that I didn't need anyone to judge me. I was doing a damn good job of it. And I would say things like, well, I didn't know I was supposed to do these things. Maybe if someone gave me a little bit of advice when I was down there to remember, maybe I would do those things. Probably not how it works, but this is the questioning I was having, the dialogue with my higher self or myself.
And many of them say that there were things that happened in the near-death experience that were crystal clear to them. Their thinking was faster and clearer than ever. And when they come back to this realm, they have trouble understanding it. That's what almost every near-death experiencer I've talked to has said, that once you are, quote, free of the brain, you're able to appreciate everything else that's going on around us. And that when you come back into the brain, you feel restricted again. They talk about trying to squeeze themselves back into this inadequate shell.
I finally got to one point where the light, this infinite fragments of light all spoke in unison as one, and I perceived this as God, and it said, "This is not your time, you must return." I said, "No way. I'm feeling love like I've never been loved before. My body is there in that cold ocean, and it's just cold meat as far as I was concerned. And it was like, I have no desire to return to that life. That life was hard. It was harsh. And it said, you must return. You have a purpose.
At some point, the message was delivered to me that I was going to return. I don't remember how that message was delivered, but I remember fighting it. I remember I was just not willing to do it. I knew where I wanted to be, and I was going to stay there.
I could hear what was going on in the mind of this rookie medic. He was really upset, and he wanted to make a difference. He wanted to feel like he didn't feel that they tried hard enough to resuscitate this body. He actually started to glow. like the heart area, actually started to glow. And then I heard a very loud male energy come over me and say, "This one's not dead." And I knew the medic, I knew this rookie, he heard it, because when he heard it, he went rigid and looked around. He looked around to see if this message had come from someone else nearby. And he realized it didn't. It was, he felt it must have been his imagination. And so he shrugged it off as, you were imagining things. And we went further down the road, and now all of a sudden this glow, it got brighter. And it started to glow from above his head to all the way to his waist. And for the second time, I heard, "This one's not dead." Now, the second time he heard it, that was enough for him to begin the path of resuscitation. He unzipped the body bag and started feeling around. He couldn't feel any pulse. He went all the way to the inner thigh. As he went to the inner thigh, I felt an ignition or a spark between me up here watching and him down there. I felt it, like I felt an actual spark where it made me jump and he jumped too. And that was enough for him that he went ahead and threw out protocol and he began to actually resuscitate the body. He hooked up a defib machine. The first round of shocks to the heart didn't do anything. The second round, it did get a single heartbeat and then flatline. And then the third round of shocks, he got a steady and a faint heartbeat to start.
And I made the choice again. I'm going back in. And I didn't have to figure out how to do so. It's the intention. We have no idea how powerful our thoughts are. It's like I'm going back in. And then boom, I was back in the body.
The minute I came to acceptance, the microsecond I came to acceptance, I found myself outside my body, watching my body being tumbled and tossed in the ocean. And another set of waves came and it started pounding my body up against the wreckage, and it forced some of the salt water out. And that's when my soul family, they gave me a gentle push, and I found myself kind of like this vibration back into my body.
This is almost universal among near-death experiencers, that they come back with altered attitudes, beliefs, values, and behavior. And they tend to become much more spiritual, for the lack of a better word. They become much more compassionate, much more altruistic, much more concerned with interpersonal relationships, and much less concerned with material things, with physical possessions.
And that changed me forever. I see people differently. Judgments and comparisons went out the window.
And before this, I was an atheist, or near atheist. I always left a little bit of a crack of a door, so that just in case kind of thing. I was super materialistic and an asshole and a bunch of stuff. And now it's way different.
Once you have this near-death experience, you realize that you're not alone. You're part of something much greater than yourself, which means that the problems of this bag of skin are not all that important. There's a lot more going on. And you tend to see your problems not as something to be escaped from, but to something to struggle with and learn from and grow from.
I was raised non-religiously, which wasn't not anti-religiously. I just wasn't raised in a religion. And at that point in my life, I was probably agnostic or atheistic. I probably didn't believe in God. Well, I'm pretty sure I didn't believe in God.
I was an engineer. I saw things pretty much black and white, And suddenly, with these understandings and things that were happening to me, I realized there's a truth that resonates within our heart. That it's not necessarily a truth that we learn in school. It's not necessarily something that we've lived or learned through life experience. But a lot of times we have these truths that when they cross our path, they resonate within our heart. And those truths are guides sometime into direction.
So love is just the best way to describe it, because it's definitely not an emotion. It's an actual force, a thing that's tangible that you feel.
Earth is a school, to live in Earth school and to grow here, and then return back home with what we learned.
and being able to find the compassion for yourself and not just others. I think that's the big thing. Yeah, I think there is no judgment on the other side, because we all make mistakes, and you're allowed to find. It's just like being a toddler. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna hurt yourself. You're gonna hurt others sometimes, but it's all about learning.
When we first started talking about near-death experiences in medical conferences in the 1980s, very few doctors had heard about these things, and most just listened and politely nodded or shook their heads and didn't say much. And now when we talk in medical conferences about near-death experiences, we often get doctors in the audience standing up afterwards and saying, "Let me tell you about my near-death experience."
But when you think about it, when do you grasp for your spirituality? When do we look for God in our lives? When do we look for, when we're desperate, exactly, right? So, that's when we've gone too far in one direction.
And as I got to heaven, I realized that God is so much bigger than what our brains can comprehend God to be. And that's why we have so many religions, is because that's our attempt at trying to understand who God is.